Hello guys, welcome to another video. Now, the Reliquary is a new series for the channel where I'll be covering various Path of Exile 2 unique items in detail, discussing their mechanics, their interactions with other mechanics, and use cases. We're appropriately kicking off the series with one of the most powerful unique items in PoE 2 right now, and that's the Temporalis unique body armor. This item is essentially the replacement for Original Sin from PoE 1 to PoE 2. Even though Original Sin exists in PoE 2, it's not nearly as strong with the damage conversion changes, and so the no-hit run for PoE 2's Sanctum equivalent, the Trial of the Sechemas, needed a new shiny reward, and this unique is that reward. To loot Temporalis, you must complete a full Trial of the Sechemas run, all 4 floors with the Last Flame unique relic in play. The Last Flame can rarely be looted from the end boss of the Trial of the Sechemas, Zarok the Eternal. This relic sets your maximum honor to 1, so you cannot make any mistakes. You need to progress the entire run without taking a single point of damage. If you take damage, you'll immediately be removed from the trial, and you'll lose your Last Flame relic as well. The trial also needs to be area level 80 or higher to enable the relic in the first place, but if you succeed, the final boss is guaranteed to drop Temporalis. Okay, so let's take a look at the modifiers on this unique body armor. Firstly, we have some very generic mods: local maximum energy shield and all elemental resistances. These modifiers have decent roles, but they're nothing special. They're still likely to be useful for most builds using this item, so they're a nice added bonus considering the power level of the other modifiers on Temporalis. Next, we have these life and mana recoup modifiers. Now, Recoup has changed a little bit from PoE 1 to PoE 2. It now recovers the percentage of damage taken from hits over 8 seconds instead of 4 seconds by default. And modifiers for Recoup are generally a lot more scarce or have significantly lower values on the passive skill tree. For example, a single life recoup cluster on the tree might net you about 15% life recoup for 3 or 4 points spent. And that makes sense considering recovery modifiers are much harder to come by in PoE 2. This makes the modifiers on Temporalis potentially very strong, if you're able to land around the top end of the roll range. Notice the very large roll range of 5 to 30% on both of these modifiers. This is important because the main reason you'll consider using Temporalis is because of the next modifier it has, the Cooldown reduction modifier, which will ultimately take priority in terms of securing a good roll. We'll get onto that one in just a moment. But this means that getting a good roll on all 3 of these modifiers is unlikely. With that said though, at 30% of damage taken recouped as life, you'd be getting about the same amount of recoup as you would from 8 passive skill points spent, so that's quite a good chunk of this stat. But this is the body armor slot after all. You could combine Temporalis with the Chronomancer's Circular Heartbeat and Rapid River Ascendancy notables to stack a large amount of life recoup, as well as making recoup recover resources over a base 4 seconds instead of 8, making it significantly more responsive as a source of recovery. You can then further invest into recoup on the tree. For example, the Pliable Flesh notable will further improve the rate at which recoup restores resources after taking damage from hits. Now, though these recoup modifiers are decent, the main reason you're going to be using Temporalis is of course because of its special flat cooldown reduction modifier. Skills have -2 to -4 seconds to cooldown. This is the only source of flat cooldown reduction in the game, and there's a good reason for that. Modifiers that apply a percentage increase to cooldown recovery rate can be extremely impactful, but are typically balanced around how much of this stat a character can reasonably obtain versus the base cooldown of a skill. But when a flat cooldown reduction is introduced, some abilities are just immediately broken by this modifier. And that's because the normal modifiers that apply percentage increased cooldown recovery rate improve the effective time elapsed over the cooldown instead of a direct reduction to cooldown time. For example, having 100% increased cooldown recovery rate on a skill that has 4-second cooldown will result in a 2-second cooldown, not a 0-second cooldown. This means that no matter how much increased cooldown recovery rate you get, you cannot completely remove the cooldown from a skill. But that changes with Temporalis, because the flat reduction to cooldown on this item literally removes the stated time from a skill's base cooldown, creating a new base cooldown from which other modifiers to cooldown recovery rate are then applied. This means that any ability that has a 4 second or less base cooldown can have its cooldown time entirely removed by using Temporalis. So for a 4 second cooldown skill, you'll need a perfectly rolled Temporalis to completely remove its cooldown, and that might be a bit difficult, because this modifier actually rolls in increments of 0.01 seconds. For example, this one right here with a roll of minus 3.61 seconds to cooldown. Shout out to Empyrean for helping me out with some cooldown testing for this video. I appreciate that, considering there's no way I'd be able to get my hands on this item, so thank you for that. Now, there's a couple of important things to mention about how this cooldown reduction modifier is applied. Firstly, since it's applied directly to the base cooldown before any CDR modifiers are applied, this means that any skill that you're able to completely remove the cooldown from will be unaffected by map modifiers or debuffs that apply reduced cooldown recovery rate, because those modifiers can no longer apply to the skill as it no longer has a cooldown. Secondly, as the modifier is applied before CDR, this means that you can only completely remove the cooldown from skills that have a base cooldown of 4 seconds or less. But with that said, there's some really broken interactions that you can take advantage of here. For example, the Blink Reservation skill, which disables your dodge roll and replaces it with a short cooldown teleport ability. At higher levels, the Blink ability has less than a 4 second base cooldown, so you can completely remove it with a good roll on Temporalis, allowing you to just freely blink around, only then being limited by your cast speed and mana. Frost Wall is another example of an ability that's just completely broken by Temporalis, allowing you to freely spam ice walls on top of a boss, again only being limited by cast speed and mana. Against bosses with large hitboxes, this can be extremely effective at dealing massive damage, especially when combined with the Icicle support gem and the Shattered Crystal passive tree notable, so the walls explode faster upon taking damage. And there's more. In fact, Temporalis is incredible when combined with many grenade abilities. You can completely remove the cooldown on most of the grenade skills, but perhaps more importantly than that, the payload support gem is completely free, providing a 50% chance for grenades to explode a second time with no downside, as the 70% reduced CDR cannot apply as there's no longer an associated cooldown. There's a crazy amount of skills you can use with Temporalis. For example, there's Frostbomb or even some Mark skills, but this should have provided some insight into just how powerful this item can be to completely break some abilities. The no cooldown blink is especially ridiculous, but I think it's appropriately ridiculous considering how difficult Temporalis is to obtain and how expensive it will be all league round as a result. Overall, Temporalis is an incredible unique that will likely shape many very high-end expensive builds due to the effective mobility that it can provide and its use case to empower skills through completely removing their cooldown. Thanks for watching this video, and as always, stay tuned and stay safe.